Welcome to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. I'm Carrie Hawker Diaz, and I am so honored to be able to sit down with Amber Washington right now. Okay, Amber, let's dive right into it. Your memoir, Whole, My Journey to W, is so deeply personal. Can you share what inspired you to write it and what W represents in your journey?
You know, I wanted to write this book back when I was 15 years old, and I've always wanted to write it to help people. But back when I was 15, I was in this mindset because of the way that my abuse was handled that it didn't affect me, you know? So I just remember thinking back then, I'm going to write this so that I can show people it's okay. You can get through this and you can be strong and you can persevere. Not understanding at the time how much damage had been done, was being done, and would continue to be done. And so when I got to a place where I was really ready to undertake that for myself, really what it came down to was educating myself. And so once I started to do that, then it transformed into an understanding of, you know, everything that I had been through, the journey. And so the W is so representative of that, of finding myself and of becoming whole again. And really where that came from was that when I was thinking about the title for this book, I was in the darkest place.
What I imagine, like just thinking of a title for a book is just difficult anyways.
Yeah, and it wasn't that I was thinking about it. It was that it came to me through this experience. But I was 33 years old. I was back living at my parents' house. I didn't know it at the time, but I was in crisis. This was the lowest point of my life. I had just been arrested. And I just remember sitting on my parents' front porch, which has always been my thinking spot. And I was lamenting, you know, and woe is me. And okay, where do we go from here? And as I'm having these thoughts, I'm picturing myself down in this hole. I just know that I have dug this hole so deep and I don't know how I'm going to get out. And so I'm visualizing myself down in this hole. And the only thing that is down there with me at this point is the shovel that I've used to dig it. And as I'm looking up, there's nothing. There's not a ladder. There's not a rope. There's not hands reaching down to help me anymore at this point. And I remember just taking that shovel and kind of digging into the side and starting to pile dirt back up. And I knew that it was going to be up to me to find my way out. But as I'm picturing this hole and I'm thinking of the word whole, H-O-L-E, honestly, all of a sudden the W just came to me. Like this epiphany of like when you put that W in front of H-O-L-E, it changes something that is void, desolate, empty into something that is complete.
That's an incredibly powerful visual too of the, you know, like digging yourself out and like, you know, no one's coming for you. Yeah. So are you going to do it yourself? Yeah. And that's powerful. How did you know you were ready to heal? Or did you know?
Well, there were a couple of different things that happened. Like I said, like I've disclosed my abuse, you know, as a child. That's something that's very rare to begin with. And so from a very young age, I have been seeking healing in so many different ways. But I also didn't know what that looked like for the longest time. I thought that had to come through and with other people, through apologies, through conversation. And so it wasn't until in 2022, I had an opportunity at work. I was working in tech and I had an opportunity to share my story into tech, which I don't have a college degree. And so even just from that perspective, I knew it was kind of unique going from, I was making $9 an hour working in a grocery store before I got into tech. And within the first 3 years, cleared 6 figures. This was something that I was like, that's a story in and of itself.
Yeah.
But as I started thinking about how to tell my story, and really it started with a group of high school kids. I can't just go in and say, hey, here's the pretty parts, you know, like, oh, you don't have to go to college and all of a sudden you could make 6 figures. And I knew that I wanted to give them context and provide a little bit more. And so I actually approached my CEO at the time, Melissa DiDonato, and said, hey, you know, here's an idea that I have. I want to share my story, but some stories are messier than others. And I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to embarrass you or the company. And she said, go for it. So I give a lot of credit to her for having the bravery as a CEO to open the space to begin with. But in doing that, it opened so much for me. And really what came from that was a lot of research. I was like, okay, I need a timeline and I want to have a better understanding. And because of the research that I was doing and just telling the story, I wanted to read other memoirs. And so it really just started with me understanding how other people had gone through their journey, how they had written it. And then really it came down to educating myself. So one of the first educational books that I read was The Body Keeps the Score. And that changed everything for me.
I started that book just a few months ago. That's an amazing for everyone to read, an amazing book. Yeah.
First of all, we've all experienced trauma, all of us, to some level or another. We just lived through a collective trauma in COVID. But as you know, at the very beginning of the book, he gives an example of a couple that have been in a car accident. So the same event and how their responses to it were very different. So just helping to educate myself and understanding what trauma is, because I think that so many of us think of trauma as the big T traumas, right? The ones that are going to be life-changing regardless: abuse, war, death, different things like that. But trauma can show up in, what the psychology world refers to as like the little T traumas too. And again, those can look different and be different for everybody as well. But yeah, that book was amazing for me and just helping me understand trauma, how it literally changes the chemicals in your brain, and what trauma responses and behaviors look like. And so I just really dove into that book, to different resourcing books, and then memoirs as well. And then I created a TikTok and an Instagram because I wanted to start sharing my story and then hear other people's as well. And so I just started to find community, and it was really through listening to other people and then educating myself that this really began, and that I was ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. You just knew. Yeah. Well, and you've spoken about the silence that followed your original disclosure of your abuse. How did writing this book help you reclaim your voice?
I can never be silenced again. That's the beauty of it, and that's the power behind it. I remember getting to a point where I was like so close to having everything written out, right? Whether it was edited or not, and calling my sister and saying, Heather, if anything happens to me, you make sure that this gets out, because that was like a fear for me that I was going to get this close and then something was going to happen.
Not be able to share your story.
So that really has been the most powerful thing, is that even though there is risk in sharing, and I've lost people, I've lost relationships, my story can't ever be silenced again.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's so powerful, Amber. And I think writing a book would be so difficult anyways, but especially about certain subjects. What would you say was the most challenging part of writing and sharing such a personal story?
Yeah, it is. I think it's definitely harder than I imagined. I just did a podcast speaking specifically about the audio version of the book that's about to release and what that process was like, because all of it has had a different effect. I'm unlocking different things, but really there's two key things that happen when you're going through something like this, and it's the physical part and then it's the emotional, neurological part. The physical part were things that I wasn't expecting either, just these visceral reactions as you're reliving or you're processing, you're having conversations with people, and the real depth of all of this back in 2022, it made me so sick. My back seized at one point. I had chronic sinus infections, chronic diarrhea, I had migraines. Like, it was just showing up in so many different physical forms. And anxiety is something that I've dealt with for a long time at this point as well. But the emotional toll that it takes, I think, is the part of it that people expect. But even in the expectation of that, this is not something that you can prepare yourself for. It's something that you hopefully are educated as much as possible. You listen to what other people's journeys have been like, and you can prep for it, but it's going to look different for everybody, no matter what. So,
what message, Amber, would you hope to give to survivors of child sexual abuse, and what would you want them to take away from your memoir?
More than anything is that we're not alone. And I think that when abuse of any form happens within a family system, it can feel so isolating, because all too often the predator, the perpetrator, is given way more protection than the victim is. And when that happens, like in my case, I felt like people didn't think that it affected me the way that it did. And so I didn't allow myself, I talk about this often now because there's such a negative connotation around the word victim, but you can't be a survivor if you were never allowed to be a victim in the first place. So I had to go back to a place of allowing myself to actually sit in victim and everything that came along with that before I really could move to the place of survivor and now thriver. It's been an incredible journey for sure. So for other survivors, just really understanding that whether you're in a place where you feel like you can talk about it or not, you're not alone. If you can't voice it, because that's not going to be safe for everybody, there's people that you can listen to. Find your community, find your people, find a support system. Because one really great thing about technology nowadays, obviously, is that with social media, our people are out there and
that's
we can find them.
Yeah, where you're not feeling so alone in what you're dealing with. Oh, that's so true. And you've actually partnered with Sapria. It's a nonprofit. If you're not familiar with them, they support survivors. How has working with them shaped your journey?
Yeah, it's been incredible, because Sapria came to me at a time in my life where I knew that I needed more than what I had. And again, this was back in 2022 when I started started to write and research and process all of this, I just said it made me sick, and my anxiety was so bad that I really was afraid at one point that it was going to kill me. So I knew that I needed help. I was already seeing a therapist. She was amazing. I was married at the time. I had some really good relationships and different support systems. And yet still, I was to the point where I was so sick, I wondered if I was going to make it to the other side. But I also knew, like, if this kills me, it kills me because it's already killing me anyway. And I knew that I was going. But at that point, I had started researching. I just remember thinking there's got to be something that's into rehab but for survivors. And so that's ultimately what led me to Sapria. So being able to attend their retreat back in 2022 was amazing and life-changing. The best thing that I have done for myself.
Their retreat?
Yeah, their retreat. Yeah, it's a 4-day retreat and it's completely free other than your travel. The travel is the only thing that you're responsible for. But it was really hard, but so rewarding, and we were very well taken care of. So just that part of the process in and of itself was monumental for me. But like you said, I've partnered with Sapria now. So Sapria continues to be part of my journey. And I also just partnered with Generation All. So
they're great too.
Yeah, that's a big part of what I'm doing now. I've just launched my own company called Whole Heals. And
congratulations.
Thank you so much. So now I'm looking to partner with nonprofits. My company is a for-profit because I'm going into corporations and providing leadership training that's all around being trauma-informed and neurodivergent-centered training. So I should be for-profit, but I'm very nonprofit aligned. And at the end of the day, I recognize that I'm going in and I'm starting to uncover things, some really uncomfortable things, right? But the point is to educate. So it would be very irresponsible of me if I walked into a corporation and said, hey, here's what trauma is, here's how it shows up, and didn't leave resources. So Sapria and Generation All, Trauma Informed Utah, I've had a really good conversation with. And there's a lot of really great nonprofits that provide the resources for different traumas that we all experience. So yes, Sapria was a big, huge part of my journey back in 2022, but the partnership that we have moving forward is it's monumental. And really the goal is that we can't talk about this enough. There's not enough of us that are talking about it to where it is going to reach everybody. So the more voices that are behind this mission, the more people that we help.
That's so true. Oh, that's so true. Thank you for saying that. And you mentioned, trauma-informed and neurodivergent sensitive training. So what does that look like in industries like tech, where these conversations are often overlooked and, like you just mentioned, not talked about?
So my purpose of going in, and this really comes from my career and from being, and not just in tech, but just being a woman. I was a stay-at-home mom before I got divorced and then found myself back in the workforce. And so just navigating different industries and different personalities and different situations, but specifically in tech, I had an experience where I had a colleague who got me on a phone call, told me that it was being recorded, and started to say things that made me feel very much like he was trying to get me fired. And this was like the first year into this new job. And I mentioned that I don't have a college degree. So going into tech, I had major imposter syndrome. I was able to work my way up from, an entry-level position, but no matter where I went, I still had imposter syndrome. And so this was a really scary moment for me. And eventually, he was starting to get a little bit more aggressive, and I just said, I'm not staying on this phone call. And I hung up and I called my manager, who at this point understood a lot of what my background was very supportive of me sharing my story as well. So understood a lot of the things, that I'd been through. But I call him and I'm hysterical, and I said, I really think that this person is trying to get me fired. And my manager, well, very well intentioned, said something to me that I didn't even realize in the moment was as triggering as it was. But he said, I don't think that is what he meant. I don't think that that's what's going on. And that was so difficult for me for a couple different reasons. A, that's something that I've heard my whole life. It's just my experience being minimized. But B, I was so confused because I was like, wait a second, he knows, and surely he understands like why this is upsetting to me. But that's what clicked. That's where the light bulb came on. And it was where this training comes from is he didn't understand. And why would he? Just because we know somebody's background doesn't mean that we understand trauma responses and behaviors, words that we're using that might trigger somebody. And so that really is the goal of this of this training is to help people, especially leadership, understand what trauma is, what trauma responses and behaviors are, how trauma shows up personally and professionally, and how we create trauma in the workplace. And so the training is designed to help, again, minimize, anything that could trigger somebody, but it really is a language. When we validate people in their experiences and in their emotions,
that's so important.
There's just so much. When we don't, it really can be very damaging. And especially for people who have experienced that just over and over and over throughout their life. And so it's interesting because I actually had a conversation with this manager probably a couple of weeks ago. And I approached him like he knew what I was doing. And he's like, Amber, you're going to have to tell me more about this and then help me understand how your training would have changed, that conversation for us. And so it really helped, even that conversation helped me understand, okay, I got to make sure that I'm communicating these things very effectively. That the way that we're going in is not, I have no intention to shame anybody. This is about education and reducing turnover rates in corporations, reducing toxic workplace culture, and really allowing humans to be human and to show up wherever we do. But I just have this theory that if we can heal the workplace, we can heal the home.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. And that's how you created Share Your Story.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. Amber, what else do you think and how else do you think that impacts the workplace culture?
Well, Share Your Story was such a cool thing because that was born from my experience in sharing my story. And once I did that, I did months of prep for this conversation that ended up being an hour-long conversation where I think that there were like 70 to 80 people that showed up, it's all online, so that showed up to the call. Once I got off that call, the messages that started to come in were just incredible, and it wasn't just, hey, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being brave. It was thank you for opening a space for me to do the same thing. And I had so many people coming to me that were sharing very personal things. That is so humbling. I'm just so honored when anybody opens up to me because it's not just that you're sharing your story with me, it's that you're trusting, and that's really what I took away from that is that we have an opportunity to open this in a place, especially in tech. We're not supposed to talk about religion, politics, personal things, and Share Your Story opened a space for people to be vulnerable. My therapist ended up reframing this for me because I kept saying it's a safe space. And he said, no, it's a brave space.
Ooh, that's powerful.
Yes. The people that are listening are creating a safe space. The people that are sharing are creating the brave space.
Very brave.
And that goes back to even just community, right? Is when we are able to share our story, no matter what that looks like, there's the speaking and there's the listening. When you find your people, that doesn't mean that those people have all been through the same things. You will find people that are willing to listen, that have never been through childhood sexual abuse or domestic violence or experienced, death of a loved one or something like that, but that still want to offer and hold space for those who have. And that is incredibly healing in and of itself. And so that, the culture shift was really incredible because I created the Share Your Story and invited colleagues to share. I didn't seek anybody out. I said, if you've got a story to share and, and you want to do this, I would love to have that conversation. And that led to a conversation with a colleague of mine who had never spoken about her sexual abuse other than to, I think, 2 people in her whole life. And this, she's just amazing. Her ability to come on and share her story was so healing for her as well. But it was such an honor for me to be able to be part of that. We had conversations about divorce. We had conversations about war right after the Israel-Palestine conflict erupted. The company that I was working for is a global company. So we've got people from Ukraine, we've got people from Russia. So it was very interesting to be able to hold those kinds of conversations and to allow colleagues to hold space for things that, a lot of us didn't understand and will never be able to directly relate to. So it just created this little circle of love, honestly. It just was a great group of people who weren't there to judge.
And that's what you deserve. Yeah. That's what everybody deserves.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you describe this platform as not just a book with your memoir, it's a movement for healing and meaningful change. How do you hope it will shift conversations about trauma and resilience?
I hope that there's a major shift. And I think that this is something that we are seeing anyways. I really feel like our generation was the first generation to open the door to change and to say, oh, you know what, this doesn't feel right, and I'm not going to parent the same way. I'm not going to continue the generational cycles and trauma, that come. And then our kids and the younger generations are actually saying, I'm not going to work in a place that is not led with compassion and empathy.
Setting boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. So just having a baseline understanding of what this all looks like. But these conversations are so important and so powerful. And so you're right. I don't see this just as a conversation. I see it as collective movement. And I'm just such a small, teeny part in that. And I've been really blessed to be able to use my voice on different platforms and to join forces with Sapria and Generation All and different nonprofits, but even just people that are willing to share my story with other people that are willing to listen. We're seeing a shift, and it's hard right now. I know that every single one of us is feeling the weight of the world on our shoulders as we watch. We're literally sitting in a newsroom. So you guys, that's your job 24/7 is to understand what's going on in the world. And for me, I have to shut it off sometimes. But things are so heavy. And so I just know that we're coming to a point where there's going to be so many people, organizations included, that are looking for some softness, that are looking for healing, that are looking for compassion and empathy. And how do we bring that into the workplace?
Yes, every workplace deserves to have that and,
Yes.
and needs that. And
Yes.
what do you wish more people understood about the experience of child sexual abuse survivors? What do you wish more people understood?
I really think that it's the way that it shows up. I think it's really easy. I know. It's really easy for us to look at other people and say, oh, he's a drug addict. Oh, she's a terrible mom. Oh, they're homeless. Oh, those are decisions that they made. And if only, they weren't lazy or chose to do something about it. But every single behavior has a root cause. Childhood sexual abuse changes everything. And kids are really resilient, and children absolutely can heal from something like childhood sexual abuse, given the right resources, the right support, the right love, the right tools. There's a lot of different studies out there that show that children who are given that path to healing right off the bat really do very well. For those of us that don't, it manifests in physical illness. It manifests in mental health problems. It manifests in suicidal ideation. It manifests in us hurting other people. And so more than anything, it really is, what do trauma responses and behaviors look like? How does it show up? How can I, as somebody who maybe hasn't experienced it, help somebody who has through that journey?
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Amber. And if someone's listening right now and they're feeling silenced, they're feeling minimized, and they're afraid to share their own story and their experience, what advice do you have for them?
I think at the very end of my book, I talk about that I understand that not everybody is in the same place that I am. I feel very blessed to have the thick skin that I do and to be able to be in a place where I can share my story. I mentioned that hasn't come without loss. It's definitely come with loss. But I haven't lived a life of fear and threat like of my actual life. And there's too many people that it's not safe for them to share their stories. So my advice to anybody that is feeling silenced in this moment is please find somebody. It doesn't have to be, on a podcast. It doesn't have to be on social media. It doesn't have to be publicly. But even if it is to yourself in a journey, start telling yourself the truth. Start with the truth first, and then find somebody that you trust, whether that's a therapist, a friend. We just talked about it. The body keeps a score. If you do not get this out, it will manifest. And it's really scary the different ways that trauma can show up in different illnesses.
Sure. And if you have someone supporting a survivor, say somebody, someone listening, somebody, or your spouse or your daughter or your dad, how can listeners support survivors personally and in their communities? How can we help?
Yeah. So personally, that really goes back to even just the conversation with my manager, right? Is don't minimize, and again, he was well-meaning. He really thought that he was trying to calm me down, but don't minimize what somebody is telling you. Validate, and don't try to go in and fix it. Ask them how you can help. Ask them what they need, because sometimes it simply is just somebody that is willing to listen. Other times, people are going to say, I need you to help me find a resource, or I need to get out of this situation. What can you do for me? And as a support system, please also understand what your boundaries are, what you are capable of doing, because these things are very, very heavy. So protect yourself as a support system, but do everything that you can to, at minimum, offer validation.
At minimum.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good. And if you have someone listening thinking, you know what, I think I'm ready to heal. I'm ready to share my story. Are there resources that you can give for, I know you said like Supriya and Generation All and even just like reading your book and, you know, if they're ready maybe to share their story.
Yeah. I don't know why this is going to make me cry. I do know why this is going to make me cry, but the amount of people that have reached out to me and either it's just been a one-on-one conversation or they have said, hey, I decided to write my book because of you. There's so many different ways for us to be able to do that. So whether it is through reading somebody else's book or finding therapy, finding your community, it doesn't even look the same for you and I. Again, we talked about the body keeps a score, right? And the couple that was in the car accident, you can go through the exact same thing and you're going to process differently. You're going to heal differently. I would say be aware that healing is a journey. It is not a destination, and that you're going to have to figure out what works for you. So trial and error, find a therapist. If that therapist isn't comfortable, don't think that therapy doesn't work. Go find somebody that will. And that could take several different therapists, but utilize the resources that are out there. Do research, ask questions.
I like that, the advice about therapy too, because I'm fully on board with therapy, but you have to have the right person.
Yes.
I mean, it's crucial.
Yes.
Okay. Those are all great resources and ideas. Thank you. And looking forward, Amber, what's the next chapter for you personally and professionally after launching your memoir?
Oh, this is the fun part. It's so exciting. I mentioned Whole Heals, so Whole Heals incorporates my book, speaking engagements, and then the training that I'm developing. And so I'm hitting it hard. So I've already been on some podcasts, media appearances. So grateful for this platform as well. So any platform that I can get, I'm taking it. Absolutely. So just sharing the story, getting the book out there. And then I've already started to write another book,
Nice.
Yeah.
Good for you.
So that's really exciting. And I don't have a time frame on that. I really envision this as there's things that I'm learning and experiencing, as I'm going. So I'm keeping track of all of that.
Yeah.
Because even this journey has been healing in and of itself, the different things that I've unlocked and just, I'm at the best place in my life that I've ever been, but I will forever be healing. We're never healed. We're always healing because life is always going to throw different things in that maybe we've experienced and now we're reacting differently, and definitely things that we've never experienced and we don't know how to react or how to heal. So yes, continuing to promote the book, starting to write the next one, and then the training and the business side of things is really where I'm super hyper focused right now. I've had people say, "Oh, you're so brave," and I feel like they're saying, "Oh, you're so crazy." But I walked away from tech in September. I walked away from tech. I walked away from a steady, secure paycheck. I mentioned making $9 an hour, living in poverty, and I left all of that to be able to pursue this because I'm so passionate about helping to educate people and making a change, and this training is going to do that. So that's really where the next chapter of my life, and I probably won't retire. I'll probably die doing this, but just the training is in the final development stages. So we're so close. I'm weeks away from signing my first strategic partnership. I mentioned signing partnerships with nonprofits. So I'm having those conversations on a daily basis. I'm actually looking for 4 impact partners that are nonprofits that can be used as well as resources for, to the clients that I'm going to be delivering to. And then, smaller sponsorships and partners. But at the end of the day, it really is about how can we all work together? How can we be part of an ecosystem that is working to heal not just our community, not just Utah, not even just, the States. How can we take this globally and make sure that we are aligning with anybody and everybody else that is doing anything just to help better this world?
If we want to find your book or follow along and get more information on Whole Heals, where's the best place to go?
So I do have a website. It's www.wholeheals.com. So it's WHOLEHEALS.com. And then I'm all over social media. So you can find me on Facebook, Amber Washington. You can find me under my tag, which is @TheListeningLamb on Instagram. So yeah, I'm out there.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank
Amber,
you, Carrie.
Thank you. I know that you have helped a lot of people that are listening.
I appreciate
by
that.
sharing your story and helping this be a brave space. a safe space. And we thank you for being on our podcast today.
Thank you for providing the platform.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you, Amber. Can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to another episode of Fresh Off the Set. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and we will see you next week. Congrats, you made it to the end. If you want to continue to freshen up your day, you can watch us on Fresh Living every weekday on CBS Channel 2 in Utah at 1 o'clock. You can also watch us on our YouTube channel, KUTV Fresh Living, and follow us on social media. We will see you next week.